Welcome, welcome. This is the second episode of the Liberty Wolf podcast. My name is Zach Strong. I'm an author of two books on communism and secret societies, respectfully titled A Century of Red and Red Gadiantons, and I am the creator and host of Liberty Wolf. Today's edition tackles the thorny question, what is liberty? Before I get to the meat of this topic, we should first discuss why it is important to know what liberty is. The answer is actually very simple. I'll give you three reasons why it is imperative to know what liberty is. First, if we do not know what liberty is, we cannot defend or promote it. Second, if we don't know what liberty is, it is impossible to recognize when its principles are being violated. And third, if we don't know what liberty truly is, we will never muster the courage, passion, and love required to make the necessary sacrifices to obtain and maintain freedom. In support of these ideas, I would like to quote two statements from two of our most brilliant founding fathers. The first comes from James Wilson. That name is not very well known today, but James Wilson was a very influential founder. He signed both the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution and served as a justice on the very first Supreme Court. In a lecture titled Of the Study of the Law in the United States, Wilson said this, quote, "Were I called upon for my reasons why I deem so highly of the American character, I would assign them in a very few words. That character has been eminently distinguished by the love of liberty and the love of law. But law and liberty cannot rationally become the objects of our love unless they first become the objects of our knowledge. The same course of study, properly directed, will lead us to the knowledge of both. Indeed, neither of them can be known because neither of them can exist without the other. Without liberty, law loses its nature and its name and becomes oppression. Without law, liberty also loses its nature and its name and becomes licentiousness. In denominating, therefore, that science by which the knowledge of both is acquired, it is unnecessary to preserve in terms the distinction between them. That science may be named, as it has been named, the science of law. The science of law should, in some measure and in some degree, be the study of every free citizen and of every free man. Every free citizen and every free man has duties to perform and rights to claim. Unless, in some measure and in some degree, he knows those duties and those rights, he can never act a just and an independent part." Close quote. To me, that is a very profound statement, and I think it's very self-explanatory, but I draw your attention to the one line that's the crux of the matter. Law and liberty cannot rationally become the objects of our love unless they first become the objects of our knowledge. Now, to sum up this introduction, I quote from Samuel Adams from the Boston Gazette, October 14th, 1771. He said, "The truth is, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought." Now, one more note before I proceed onward. Some people make a huge fuss trying to differentiate the terms freedom, liberty, agency, free will, etc. I use all of these terms interchangeably. When I say freedom, think liberty. When I use the term agency, think freedom, and so on and so forth. Now to the heart of today's issue. What is liberty? My favorite definition of liberty was given by the great Thomas Jefferson, who was my personal hero, in 1819. In a letter to Isaac Tiffany dated April 4th, 1819, Jefferson observed, quote, "Of liberty, then, I would say that, in the whole plenitude of its extent, it is unobstructed action according to our will. But rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the right of an individual." Close quote. To me, this is a powerful statement. I think it's the best definition of liberty ever given. So let's analyze what we've just read. In the first place, Jefferson said that in a strictly technical rendering, liberty simply means the ability to do whatever you want, regardless of the consequences, morality, effect upon others, etc. This is a very libertine notion. Libertine is not the same as liberty. Libertinism and true liberty, rightful liberty, are in fact irreconcilable and cannot coexist. Jefferson made it very clear that he favored what he termed rightful liberty. Let me repeat this definition of rightful liberty. Quote, rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Therefore, rightful, just, upright, stable, moral liberty is the right to exercise your agency in whatever way your conscience deems right, so long as your actions do not infringe upon the equal rights of other people. That is the true meaning of liberty in a free, civil, and ordered society. True liberty does not mean simply what is legal. Throughout history, blasphemy, immorality, priestcraft, human sacrifice, murder, rapine, plunder, racism, and 1,000 other evils have been made legal by corrupt governments, dictators, and uninformed populations. What is legal is not always lawful, nor is it always moral or right. Liberty takes a higher ground. A truly free society is one in which the individual is protected in his ability to make his own decisions, whatever they may be, so long as they do not violate someone else's equally protected rights, their health and well-being, or their ability to pursue happiness. Under such a system, for example, an individual's right to worship a god, no god, or 50 gods must be ensured, so long as his ideology does not preach violence, threaten the destruction of other people or their liberty, or lead him to violate another's rights. Never in world history has such a noble notion of liberty as this been given to a people, yet that is precisely the conception of liberty given to America by her founding fathers. On Independence Day, 1851, Daniel Webster spoke of this unique American heritage. He said, quote, our inheritance is an inheritance of American liberty. That liberty is characteristic, peculiar, and altogether our own. Nothing like it existed in former times, nor was known in the most enlightened states of antiquity. While with us, its principles have become interwoven into the minds of individual men, connected with our daily opinions and our daily habits, until it is, if I may so say, an element of social as well as political life. Close quote. Liberty was and has been the American heritage. America has been used as God's emissary to preach the gospel of liberty to mankind. The United States has traditionally enjoyed a higher level of freedom than any nation in history. The parallels are not even close. Now, the reasons for this are many, but I want to mention two. First, early Americans understood what liberty really is and how crucial it is to the abundant life. They were far more educated in the first principles of good government, self-rule, rule of law, constitution writing, and general liberty than we are. They had practical hands-on experience forming colonies, states, and a new nation. They were forced to think deeply about these issues, and by trial and error, they learned what liberty was, what worked and what didn't. They also lived under the oppression of British kings and could easily contrast life under a corrupt monarch and life under a free, self-governing republic. Our forefathers were true patriots who were intimately acquainted with freedom. Much of their rave success is attributable to the fact that they understood the correct principles of liberty and were willing to die protecting them. This brings me to my second reason why America has placed such a lofty value on liberty. Our forefathers rightly understood that our rights come from God. As such, rights are sacred, and every means should be employed to establish and defend them. This belief was codified in the Declaration of Independence in these iconic words, quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Close quote. The Declaration of Independence was America's first law. It was used in court rulings for generations, in fact. It provided the ideological foundation upon which this nation was built, and all of it hinges upon the declaration and acknowledgement that our freedom comes from God, our rights come from God, and that these rights must be protected and preserved at all hazards. Studies have repeatedly proved that our founding fathers quoted more from the Bible than from any other source. The gospel of Jesus Christ shaped their views more than any other thing. They believed that in order for God's plan to be successful, and in an individual's agency, his stewardship must be legally protected and guaranteed. This desire to ensure every man had his right of conscience protected drove and inspired them. Without the burning testimony that their rights came from God, and that each person's agency had to be guaranteed so that he could stand accountable for his own acts at the judgment day, I cannot fathom why our founding fathers would have risked so much in their fight and revolt against British tyranny. To our founding fathers, true, rightful liberty was inseparable from morality and religion. In his famous 1796 farewell address, and I urge you to please study it, President George Washington declared, and I quote, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in an exclusion of religious principle. It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule, indeed, extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric?" Close quote. Here we have the founding father of this country explaining that America's political prosperity relies upon our nation's morality and sense of religious obligation. Only a fake patriot would seek to shake the foundation of religion and morality. Nothing is more important to the stability of liberty, to the preservation of our rights, and the rights of Americans than religion and morality. Every single one of our founding fathers, yes, even Thomas Paine, believed likewise. John Adams, for example, stated, quote, "Liberty can no more exist without virtue and independence than the body can live and move without a soul." Thus our founders' supreme motivation for defending liberty was religious. They saw it as their Christian duty to defend the liberty of all men. And they did it through law, through the U.S. Constitution. And we have already determined that freedom is unobstructed action that only stops where another person's rights and well-being begin. Let's now discuss what this law looks like in a pluralistic society, such as we have. Now, in this day of collectivist corruption, we endure a never-ending stream of stories and headlines about the so-called rights of this or that group, gay rights, women's rights, black rights, etc. This obsession with group rights actually erodes freedom. A necessary component of liberty is the equal distribution and protection of rights. By definition, something is not a right if it applies exclusively to one group while being denied to others. Political analyst Joel Skousen has said that in order for something to be a right, it must be able to be enjoyed simultaneously by everyone. Think about it. Education is a great example. No one has a right to education, and certainly not free education. Why? This is so because one must be the educator and is therefore deprived of the education. Education cannot simultaneously be encouraged by all when one party is compelled to do the educating. Something like life, however, can be enjoyed simultaneously by everyone. Property as well. These sorts of things. And we must realize that there are no group rights and no exclusive rights. There are only human rights, natural rights, which are bestowed equally upon all men by a loving God. Judge Felix Frankfurter, for instance, said, quote, "Ultimately, there can be no freedom for self unless it is vouchsafed for others," close quote. Where rights do not extend equally to all peaceable citizens, there liberty is not. It's just that simple. Now, another important issue is the false idea of a victimless crime. This talking point is promoted by those who are either ignorant or who are seeking to justify immoral or self-destructive behavior, such as the abuse of drugs, pornography, and alcohol. But is substance abuse really a victimless crime? Or does it negatively impact the entire community? If morality and religion are the pillars of free society, as General Washington claimed they were, and which I believe, and drugs and alcohol and pornography undermine those pillars, then they are a threat to society. On an individual micro level, drugs destroy homes and families. No honest person can deny that. Now, founding father Elias Boudinot, another one of those forgotten founding fathers who is so brilliant, so faithful, was an amazing patriot. He once remarked, quote, "Good government generally begins in the family, and if the moral character of a people once degenerate, their political character must soon follow." Close quote. Freedom, morality, and stability begin in the home. Good citizenship begins in the home. Good education, true education, and the principles that really matter in life, it all begins in the family, in the home, around the fireplace, at the dinner table. Anything that attacks that foundation of our freedom, our citizenship, our civility, is a threat. Now, Samuel Adams, sometimes called the father of the American Revolution, he once said this, quote, "He who is void of virtuous attachments in private life is, or very soon will be, void of all regard for his country. There is seldom an instance of a man guilty of betraying his country who had not before lost the feeling of morality, or the feeling of moral obligations in his private connections. Since private and public vices are in reality, though not always apparently, so nearly connected, of how much importance, how necessary is it that the utmost pains be taken by the public to have the principles of virtue early inculcated on the minds of even of children, and the moral sense kept alive, and that the wise institutions of our ancestors for these great purposes be encouraged by the government. For no people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued, when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." It's just an absolutely incredible statement, and if anyone examines history closely, they will see that it is absolutely true and is borne out generation after generation after generation. Private morality, we must acknowledge, is not private, particularly when it negatively impacts the general welfare or the ability to pursue happiness of the people. If homes collapse, society will inevitably collapse. We must understand that. That which therefore endangers and impacts the character of families and innocent people, such as pornography and substance abuse, becomes a threat to the liberty of the entire nation and falls under the purview of government. For in the final equation, the government's role is to preserve the liberty of its people against all threats. I reiterate that liberty is not the same as libertine. Liberty does not mean you get to do whatever you want without consequence. That would be anarchy. And anarchy, frankly, is more dangerous than tyranny. Rightful liberty takes into consideration the equal rights of others, including the right to have one's health and well-being and property not be damaged by the actions of other people. We are dealing with a higher and more enlightened principle that ensures the individual's agency while simultaneously preserving his rights from infringement and guaranteeing the well-being of a stable, civil society. The system given to us by our founding fathers is truly an inspired and brilliant system, the best system known to man, the best ever devised, and I believe it was inspired by Almighty God. We have been given an inheritance and heritage, a unique heritage, of American liberty, a liberty based on equal rights and just law, a system of liberty. It is our duty to defend rightful liberty from all attacks and to preserve the moral character of the American people. I want to close this episode by reading two quotes from a fiery Baptist pastor named John Allen. On Thanksgiving Day, 1772, Allen said this in his passionate sermon on liberty, quote, It is no rebellion to oppose any king, ministry, or governor that destroys by any violence or authority whatever the rights of the people. Shall a man be deemed a rebel that supports his own rights? It is the first law of nature, and he must be a rebel to God, to the laws of nature, and his own conscience, who will not do it. A right to the blessing of freedom we do not receive from kings, but from heaven, as the breath of life and essence of our existence, and shall we not preserve it as the beauty of our being? Therefore, if there be any vein, any nerve, any soul, any life or spirit of liberty in the sons of America, show your love for it, guard your freedom, prevent your chains, stand up as one man for your liberty, for none but those who set a just value upon this blessing are worthy the enjoyment of it. Close quote. It is my hope that each of us will realize the overarching importance of liberty, both in this life and the next, place a just value on freedom, and stand up to prevent our enslavement. Everything hinges upon whether we maintain our freedom and our God-given rights, those very freedoms and God-given rights defended in the Constitution of the United States of America. So I ask you to join me next time in episode number 3 for a discussion and an introduction to conspiracy research, conspiracy theory. For now, though, this is Zach Strong signing off for Liberty Wolf. And as always, Sic Semper Tyrannis, long live liberty.